JD Vance is with us now, right off the Senate floor, senator from Ohio. JD, let's just start there because Buck and I are talking about what a lot of people out there are talking about in the wake of the Robert Hur report. Do you expect Joe Biden to be the candidate? What do you think Democrats are going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to replace the guy. And this goes to the heart of, I think, the big question that conservatives often have of the elites in our country is, are they sort of evil geniuses controlling things behind the scenes? Or, are they maybe evil, but largely just a bunch of mediocre people who don't have that much control? And I know a lot of these guys, I tend to think that they don't have that much control, that they sort of rule by fear and intimidation. They're pretty incompetent. And it's hard for me to see how they could pull off yanking Joe Biden from the ballot and replacing it with somebody competent. Now, do I think it's possible, he could step down and Kamala Harris becomes the nominee? But that's maybe politically even worse for the Democrats. So I don't sort of see that as the risk. The risk would be, Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom, somebody with some charisma and with a completely different brand identity. Do they come along and save the Democratic ticket? I don't see how they do it, guys. It's very, very hard to replace a president on the ballot this late in the game. These primaries have already started. Filing deadlines have passed in a lot of states. So it's very, very tough. And if they do pull it off, I think it suggests that our enemies are a little bit more competent than I think they are.
I just want to remind everybody that we've said JD is brilliant and can look into the future and see very well what is happening because he sees it the way that I see it. JD, can we ask you to explain to everybody? This is really interesting, and it's one of the reasons I know you wanted to come on today. You sent a memo to Republican colleagues in Congress about what you say is an impeachment time bomb for the Trump presidency if he tries to stop the forever funding of the war in Ukraine. Tell us about this, because people need to know about what's going on here.
Yeah, so I really just picked up on this in the last couple of days. So this is the Ukraine funding bill that we've had barely a few days to read. It's being debated on the floor right now. Actually, I just left Rand, the Senate floor, and then I'll sort of come back later this afternoon to make my own pitch here. But it's not just $61 billion to Ukraine. It promises and appropriates the money far into the future, into 2026, as a matter of fact, which, of course, would be well into the second Trump presidency. Now, why does this matter? If you cast your minds back to 2019, the very first impeachment was based on the idea that Trump did not give Ukraine the money that had already been appropriated. So the exact same country, the exact same pot of money, and the exact same theory are built into this. Now, there have already been leaks coming out, and you see this in the Washington Post, for example, where they'll say that the reason they appropriated money into 25 and 26 is they wanted to tie Trump's hands. They wanted to control Donald Trump from taking a different course diplomatically in Ukraine. Well, first of all, that's a terrible affront to Republican voters, to anybody actually who thinks that democracy should matter and whoever we elect president should run our diplomacy. But if Donald Trump does, for example, what he's promised on the campaign trail, tries to bring an end to the conflict, then he may very well face articles of impeachment. I believe this, guys. I think is a very, very important point. If this bill passes in its present form, through the Senate and through the House, I believe that it will serve as the predicate to impeach Donald Trump in 2025. Will it be bogus? Yes. Will I fight against it? Yes. But that doesn't mean they won't try to do it. And I think we ought to deprive them of that tool now when we have the chance.
JD, speaking of Trump, who we all know is going to be the nominee, what in the world is Nikki Haley doing? Try to make sense of her game plan as you see it. She's going to get whipped in South Carolina. She has no hope on Super Tuesday. What are her advisors telling her? What would you tell her? What's her game plan here?
Well, I think you have to remember, to run for president, you kind of have to tell yourself crazy stories about how much people love you and how much people want you as their nominee. And so she's constructed, I think, a reality in her own brain. It's sort of her ego combined with her own psychosis that she can somehow become the Republican nominee for president. Now, of course, all of us who aren't Nikki Haley are looking at the tea leaves and saying, that's crazy. But it's actually not Nikki Haley that matters, and it's not us that matters. What's going on here is that there are a lot of anti-Trump, some explicitly Democratic donors who are going to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars into her campaign, because every day that her campaign goes on, that's siphoning resources away from other Republican candidates, including Donald Trump. It's attack ads that are running against Donald Trump. It's just an entire Republican Party that is not focused on the get-out-the-vote operation that we're going to need to win in November. So really, I think what this it means is fundamentally people don't want Trump to be the nominee, and they don't want him to win, and so they're using Nikki Haley as an interim weapon before the general election really starts.
Speaking of JD Vance, Senator from Ohio, and JD, do you think that there are any lessons that have been learned by some of your Senate colleagues in the aftermath of that disastrous bipartisan border bill push? And do you think that's going to affect the immigration conversation from the GOP side going forward, perhaps in a positive way? I know we've got Trump saying a lot of the right things.
Well, I mean, first, what we should say is, look, this is Joe Biden's fault. He took a series of discrete steps very early in his presidency that were designed to open the borders, and it worked. This is by design. It's created the border crisis that we have, and he's really the only person with the power to turn back around. Now, we also, I think, have to, at the Republican level, Republican legislative level, I should say, we got to push back against this craziness and actually hammer the Biden administration. You know, the mistake that we made with this border negotiation is it was done in secret, and when the border product was weak sauce, as I expected it would be, you had Republican leadership attacking Donald Trump and conservative Republicans instead of Joe Biden. So the game plan here has to be to keep the focus on where it matters, which is Joe Biden and his inability and refusal to secure the southern border. If you have Republican leadership going out there and attacking Donald Trump, then it's going to just be free, in-kind contributions to the Democrats, and that's the thing that we have to guard against.
JD, when you look, obviously Ohio is going to be Trump country, but you're kind of plugged in there in the Midwest. Pennsylvania, when you look at Wisconsin, when you look at Michigan, how optimistic are you about the trend lines that you see in the Midwest right now? I know we're 9 months out, and there's still a lot of ways to go. But do you think, based on what you're seeing on the ground in Ohio and then on those bordering states, that Trump is well-positioned right now in the Midwest, or do you think there's still a lot of reason for apprehension?
So it's very early, and we don't want to let our foot off the gas, but I'm extremely optimistic about Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I think Michigan is always going to be a fight, and if the election is super close, I think the election will actually turn on Michigan. So you're talking about 5,000 or 10,000 votes that could decide the presidency in a close election. So yeah, I'm optimistic about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I think Michigan is going to be a little bit harder. We should still win it. But that's going to be the hardest one. And look, if we win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, it's very hard to see how we lose this election. So, look, if I'm betting right now, I think Donald Trump is the clear favorite. I've seen various analysts say that they've never had an election where Trump is leading in the polls, much less by 4 or 5 points as he is in most polls. So far so good. We just got to keep our foot on the gas, and again, not let stupid Republicans make the argument about themselves instead of about Joe Biden's failures.
Do you have any insights to offer us here, JD, as just the last one for you, from this Super Bowl football game over the weekend? Anything that stuck out to you, or anything that you did they pan over to Taylor Swift too much for your liking? What'd you think?
Look, it was a good game. I mean, I like defensive battles. I thought everybody, there was no officiating controversy. That's the thing I keep coming back to. No major officiating controversy. So, look, I thought it was a great game. I don't really care that much about the teams. I'm a Bengals guy myself, but congrats to the Chiefs. It looks like we really do have a dynasty here, and hopefully the Bengals can knock them off next year.
JD Vance, everybody, Senator from Ohio, maybe vice presidential pick. We'll see. JD, thanks for being with us. Appreciate you, buddy.
Take care, guys.